Welcome to Enjoy the Journey podcast, where we interview expert entrepreneurs and thought leaders to help guide you in pursuit of financial freedom. Presented to you by Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and Sam Panetta, the Money Man, where we help service-based business owners remove cash flow bottlenecks, maximize their profits, and turn business profits into personal wealth. G'day guys, this is Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and we're here for another episode of the Enjoy the Journey podcast. Now, you guys have been getting a very big dose of property experts over the course of the last couple of weeks, and I'm really excited to get one of my new friends, Colin Fragar from Council Approvals, on the podcast to pick his brain. Now, Colin comes to us with a really unique skill set. I think it's a skill set that many of us overlook and have probably never even thought about when it comes to amassing a sizable property portfolio and using property to achieve financial freedom. So I was super excited to get the opportunity to interview Colin, have a really great conversation around his journey in property and how he's been able to develop his methodology and help many business owners and entrepreneurs be able to build wealth through property as well. So Colin, thanks for joining us, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, great to be here, Jackson. And I appreciate all the listeners as well. It takes a lot of, I think it shows who you are as a listener to listen to these podcasts, and it really shows that you're hungry for more. So hopefully it helps today.
Mate, we've all got to lead with value, and it's all about education, mate. So I'm really looking forward to unpacking some of your intellectual property, Colin. So let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about you and Council Approval.
Okay, so I am first and foremost a proud husband and proud father of two little kids, and we just actually had 6 weeks away, even amongst all COVID. And I worked in the mornings, had afternoons off, and really the principles that allowed me to be where I am today and to spend the quality time with my family has been because I think there's the quote that I try to live by. You can either play now and pay later, or pay now and play later. And I guess because of the principles that you, Jackson, share, they've helped me to shape throughout my life. They've helped me to be who I am today and to enjoy those quality time with my kids. So I run a council approval group. We help to get council approval for people. But really, property is my passion. And hopefully I can share a few tips and tricks today which will help you along in your journey.
Fantastic, mate. I think that's great. So let's start at the beginning in terms of your personal property journey, Colin.
Okay, so I was the kind of guy who, instead of partying, I thought, okay, no, I need to learn. I need to learn as much as I can, and I really want to create a better future for myself. So bought my first property when I was young, when I was 19. And I remember the first deal that I did, it was like the worst house in the worst street. And it was this house that had 13 cats living in there, and you could smell it from the street. And so I just renovated it myself for about 6 months. And at the end of it, I was a university student. And so I bought my first property when I was at university. And at the end of it, I realized, hang on, I've just created as much wealth in this one deal as what I would in an entire year when I graduated as a lawyer, because I was studying law at the time. I thought, hang on, I'm onto something. So I continued on. I, after that, used the equity to buy the second property. And that's when I started to experiment a little bit with small scale development, and I bought a house that I could subdivide, and I built a house on the back behind that. And yeah, it just kind of it really came down to educating oneself. And I remember I went to New York for a while, and I studied, and it was in the days when there was bookstores and you could go and you could buy a whole bunch of books, and there was a whole aisle in Barnes and Noble just on real estate. And I went and bought almost every book, had to buy a suitcase to bring it home, and I got to customs in Sydney. And the customs were looking through every single page of the book, because I thought that I was bringing in drugs or something like that. But I share that story because even though some of the things that I've done, I don't want to kind of big note myself, but it's really come because of a lot of hard work and a lot of education. And it got to the point where I think I owned 13 properties by the time I more or less finished university at the age of 27. And it came about, because of education and because of learning and doing what you're doing in this podcast.
And I think that's so important, Colin, because I think there's two ways to get educated. There's the traditional way of going to university, spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on your traditional education to then go sit in a day job and potentially not earning a whole heap of money, right? And then there's the exiting of the matrix, where you learn that the real education that's going to help springboard your way to financial freedom. Where did you see that there was a need for you to get that kind of outside of the matrix education, Colin? What was the kind of straw that broke the camel's back that really got you into that thirst for knowledge?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we need to keep doing, and I think the traditional educations are certainly awesome, and I really love it, all types of education. But I think if you can take ownership for your own future, and I was listening to one of your previous podcasts recently, Jackson, and talking about creating a roadmap and having those goals that you need in your life. You realize that you don't have the skill set that you need, and there's a quote by Isaac Newton. And he said, Sir Isaac Newton, I should say, the guy that just was really advanced in his field. There's a famous quote which I also try to live by, and he says, "If I have stood further, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants." And he was crediting his success to the people that had gone before him. And if you can take as much information as you can from other people like Jackson or the other people he has on these podcasts, then it really helps us to step forward into the future.
I think that's so important. I think that the best investments that I've ever made have been in education. One of our mutual mentors and good friends, Dale Beaumont, has been an integral part of our business success. And it's just about learning from those people, standing on those shoulders of giants that can really propel us to that next level. So that's awesome. So Colin, let's talk about what happened then. You obviously amassed this great property portfolio, and
Yes.
What happened next?
Okay, that was kind of chapter one, and I could probably finish there, but actually it's a really interesting story, and one that I hope that you as a listener learn from. I got to the point where I was, I guess, in my late 20s, and I'd kind of almost, I wouldn't say it was by chance, but I kind of surprised myself how well it had gone. And I got to the point where I realized, hang on, success for me was more than owning property. It was more than having a successful business. There was something that I was missing, and I wanted to give back. And so an opportunity presented itself, and I went to Africa for 2 years as a volunteer.
Wow.
Which was really, really cool, and had probably a whole different discussion. In order for me to get to Africa, I effectively had to dismantle my property portfolio, and I was fairly negatively geared back then. And that was one of the big mistakes I made, was that in my first chapter one of my property portfolio, I was largely creating this portfolio, and it didn't matter as long as it was going up in value. I didn't mind what the negative cash flow was, and that was a huge mistake that I made. And so anyway, I went to Africa, had an awesome experience, but also at the same time sold everything. So I went from the 13 properties down to 2 properties. And I got home a completely different person and completely better person for serving and giving back to a cause which I was really passionate about. And I got home, and I met my now wife, and we were just dating, and then we got engaged, and it was the week of our engagement party. And our landlord, my landlord, called me. So I was the landlord. My managing agent called me and said, "Colin, I'm really sorry to say that your house burned down last night." And this is the same house that I renovated when I was 19, and I put my heart and soul into. And just to give it context, when I got back from Africa, I was worth negative $250,000. And so I'd gone from being like, in my mind, kind of like the hero in property as a 20-year-old, and I'd been humbled so much, and I was worth negative $250,000. And then my house burned down. And this was a house that I was going to move into with my wife. It was going to be our matrimonial home, as they say. And so then I called my fiance, my wife now, and this is the week of our public engagement. I said, "Hey, Lauren, I got something to tell you, and I hope you're sitting down." And she thought that I was breaking up with her, but then I told her, "Oh, our house burned down last night," and the story goes that she says she was much relieved. And it's just like, it was just and I had one other property, and I just couldn't sell it. It's just, the market was down, and so it was a really trying time for me. And that's when I kind of dug deep, and I thought, am I just a has-been? And there's a point that you made, Jackson, recently in a podcast, that you can never unlearn what you already know. And I realized, hang on, no, it's not the outside world which is important. It's what's in my head, and I know I can do this again. And so I dug deep, and I worked out what I could do. And I kind of took all the experiences from my previous property and business experiences, and I thought, no, okay, I know what to do now. And so that's when I started to create a brand new portfolio, this one based on positive cash flow, but also using some of the strategies we'll talk about a bit later, about how to create positive cash flow real estate, but within capital cities or high growth areas.
Fantastic. Wow. And look, it's a really powerful story. I think this is one of my mentors always said to me, Colin, that one thing that no one can ever take away from you is your ability to earn an income. And I think there's many other people out there that might have given up. They've been so disheartened and said, "Oh, I've come too far. There's no way I'm going to be able to claw my way back." and then just kind of just cruised through life. But you dug deep, you found the perseverance, and then you just started again. Was there a moment where you said, stuff it, I'm just going to let this be? Or was it all you, as soon as you saw that you got knocked down on your bum, that you decided to get back up, dust yourself off, and then get at it again?
Yeah, there was a lot of times where I thought, this is it, it's all finished. And actually, it was I give credit to Lauren, my wife. She found this property education seminar that I could go to, and so she dragged me along. We flew all the way to Brisbane to go and attend it, and we travel all the time. We got there, and I sat in the back row, and I was about half an hour into it, and I realized, hang on, I already know this. Actually, I know this already, and that kind of reignited the spark again for me.
Fantastic.
Pull myself back up.
I love that, mate. And look, it's funny, there's sometimes that just external influence, that little thing that just pushes us back into full swing, which is awesome. So let's talk about some of these pitfalls. Obviously, you help clients with maximizing on these opportunities through getting the council approvals and getting these deals across the line. And so let's talk about the typical context of how these things come about. Let's say we've got business owners that are listening and they want to look at alternative ways to manufacture wealth. They're done with the negative gearing style strategies where they're loss leading with a kind of a promise of a brighter future. And they're tired of burning the cash flow month in, month out. And they want to have a positive cash flow portfolio that allows them to springboard their way to financial freedom. But those opportunities are often pretty few and far between, right? So how do you structure them, Colin?
Yeah, great. You touched on some very important points there. And I think a lot of business owners really are a slave to their business, and they're just so focused on their business, and they don't look outside of their business. They're always reinvesting their money. And yeah, it's kind of like putting all your eggs in the same basket. I think it's important for any business owner to start, if you're not already, or to even expand what you're doing, to be able to invest that money elsewhere. And Jackson is, of course, the master at that. But in terms of where I come from in the council approval group, what I see with our clients, and we've helped thousands of them now, and definitely in my own life, is an ability to, what you could say, manufacture equity, to be able to create opportunity instead of just relying on what the market does, to be able to really, with the help of the team around you, to create this equity to set you up for the future. Some of the mistakes, though, that I see people make in this, and we'll get into further depth in it, is that I do see that people try to do it on their own. And Jackson and I were having a bit of a chat just before about often a developer, sorry, I shouldn't say a developer, often a business owner wants to be a developer. And they try to do it on their own. And it's not for the faint-hearted, but I think with systems, with the right team around you, with town planners, which is really what we are, town planners and architects. What they do is they find the opportunities for you. And they say that a town planner will tell you what you can't do with your property, but a consultant town planner will tell you what you can do. And so our job is really to find the highest and best use, but then to approach it from a different angle. And we really want to create for you a positive cash flow investment.
Beautiful. And I think this is a really common trap that many business owners find themselves in. What I've seen in the past, Colin, I'm sure you've seen this time and time again, is people approach this with ideas of grandeur. They think they can just buy any old block of land, put 2 dwellings on it, do a duplex or do a small townhouse development or whatever it might be, and then flip that for a profit. And in your experience, when we find people who are lay people who don't necessarily have that level of experience, they haven't done these kinds of deals before, how often would you say they get it right?
Yeah, not much at all. And you can actually lose your shirt if you don't really know what you're doing. But having said that, there literally every day of the week, there are thousands of people that are doing it really well. And so, yeah, the educating yourself like you are listening to this podcast, but having that right team around you is really important. I think a part of all of this is something that we want to design for you, is to be able to reduce debt levels. And so I see a lot of people going into a project, they buy the property, they take on extra debt for the construction, but they don't work out ways that they can reduce their debt levels. And I think that's really important as you move into this space, that you keep on looking at ways, how can I keep reducing my debt levels?
I think that's super important. Look, I think in current environment, there's so many people that are over leveraged. And it can catch them with their pants down, unfortunately, because it's one of those things. The bank's always going to come knocking for their repayment, and it's one of those things. Many people have got into a lot of trouble by taking on too much debt.
Yes. And so one of my favorite strategies, if I could share a little bit about that,
please.
is what we are calling the dual occupancy subdivision strategy. And for want of a better term, and what it involves is you find this is small scale subdivision, small scale development. So you're not getting into the big end of town. You're doing something that's very manageable. You're purchasing hopefully a house that you can retain, and you're looking for a property that you can retain the house. But as well as that, build a second dwelling behind. Now, this is more than just a granny flat, more than just a secondary dwelling. It's larger. It's usually 3 bedrooms. But what we do here at the Council Approval Group is we work out ways that we can then subdivide that property. And so I think then it's the best of both worlds. What we do is we build the extra dwelling for you. We keep that extra dwelling and we sell off the existing dwelling. So you end up reducing your debt level. So you've got a brand new house. You've sold off the old house because you've subdivided it off. You've reduced the debt levels. And that's how you end up with a positive cash flow. So you can end up purchasing in a high growth area, for example, in Sydney's second airport region. And if you just added a granny flat, it would be positive cash flow. But because you add this extra dwelling, you sell off the old one to reduce debt levels, you end up with a positive cash flow. Some of the reasons why I like to retain the brand new dwelling, not the existing one, is if you retain the brand new one, you get the depreciation benefits, but also, and talk to your accountant obviously, but there's ways to do it so you don't have to pay GST as a developer. If you're starting to sell off brand new property, you often have to sell it with GST and pay GST and you lose 10% of your
10%,
profit.
Yeah, wow. So this is a really creative way, and this gets me really excited, Colin. Like as soon as I heard this idea and I go, oh, wow, this is a really exciting strategy. So talk us through the mechanics and some of the timelines, because I guess this is a lot of the stuff that your team is helping your clients with. So let's say that you've got a client that comes to you and says, hey, Colin, I'm looking for an opportunity to create positive cash flow property. What was the first step?
Okay, so the first step is to work out, well, first of all, you probably want to work out what your borrowing capacity is, and then that would help us to determine where the property is that you would buy. And then the next step is once we worked out what your borrowing capacity is, and we're looking at what sort of the entrance price point is. And I think it's important, if you're listening to this, don't be discouraged, because this is a strategy which is designed for people which have had some success in business, but you don't need to be rolling in it to be able to pull this off. So you can, what we do is we find this, it's quite a sophisticated process actually, but we look at all the properties that are up for sale, some which aren't even on the market. We look at what the minimum lot size is, what their zoning is, whether they drain to the street or away from the street. We look at all those different things and we start to come up with concepts for you. And in the end, what we're looking for is that property that we can retain the existing dwelling and get that approval for the dual occupancy subdivision. One of the reasons why we like the dual occupancy subdivision, that might be a new phrase for people, is that you can depart from minimum lot size. So what I mean by that is if you look up the planning law in your region, you'll look out, okay, this is the minimum lot size I need to subdivide a property. But quite often, depending on the local government area, is if you do what they call a dual occupancy subdivision, you can get a departure from the minimum lot size. And what that means is that you can, as council has said, if you build the dwelling before you subdivide it, we will give you a discretion on the minimum lot size because council has said, yep, we can see the way it's going to look. There's no risk here of creating a small little lot which has a horrible house on it. They can see, yep, good design, good principles, we're going to approve it.
This can drastically reduce your money down in terms of the type of dwelling that you would typically have to look for a normal subdivision style strategy, right?
Yes, that's right. So you're looking for, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be medium density. It could be low density, which is great because you're not competing with bigger developers. It means you can buy in normal residential areas. So yeah, the price point is quite affordable. If you can't hit that straight away in the major cities, then yeah, the outskirts, we can certainly pull it off for people. Fantastic. So yeah, we've done this for probably thousands of clients and 10 plus for myself now, and that I've got in my portfolio. But I think just to go back to what are the metrics that you're looking for when you're looking at these deals?
Yeah.
So what I particularly look for in terms of the finances is what is your end cash flow position going to be? So you're not necessarily looking at what the profit of the deal is. Whereas if you're doing a larger multi-unit housing, if you're doing residential flat buildings, if you're doing apartment buildings, you're probably looking at the overall yield. But the purpose of us is the end game for you here is not the profit you make, but to get you a property that you can retain. It's positive cash flow in a high growth area. And that's really the end game that you're looking at, not how much money you're making out of it. Well, you're still making hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it's not the.
And I guess we always start with the end in mind. That's really where we definitely align, Colin. So let's talk about timeline. So we do that research, that really in-depth due diligence exercise to find the right block. We acquire that property. What would then be the next stage?
Okay, so you acquire the property and you probably allow yourself a few months to find the right deal and negotiate it. Then what you're looking at is preparing plans and getting the DA submitted to council. We really want to make sure that package is sound. I think one of the great things about using a town planner is they do speak the same language as council. So we've put together a package which has its best possible chances of success. But also we're probably looking for ways to get around some of the planning laws, some of the loopholes that we know about. So I'd probably allow for that process of design and getting into council about 2 to 3 months. Okay. Then you probably, depending on which council, they're never very quick, but you're probably allowing 6 months for that. So you're probably looking at from when you purchase to when you have your approval, around 9 months. Yep. And from that point, then the next 3 months is really about site preparation, getting the builders. We can tender it out. You can tender it out and you get the right builder in line. And then you're looking at building from that 12-month mark. From that 12-month mark, it's only a 6-month build, something like that. It's not a huge project. So you're looking at then from start to finish 18 months. Yep. And then we want to go to market to be able to sell off one of those dwellings, hopefully the old one for you.
And I guess the aim of this is, if possible, look to rinse and repeat the strategy.
Yes, we do. We don't want this to be your only project, your first and last one. If you pull off this strategy successfully, and this is what I love about it, and the reason why I've been able to recover from 13 properties to negative 250,000, now to be rebuild it all much better, is I've used this portfolio strategy to be able to grow fairly quickly. It's sustainable because I'm growing my cash flow. But what I love about it is that you not only do you sell off one of them to pay off your debt, but allows you to pull the money out to go to the next project. So you can literally line them all up and roll out fairly quickly.
And I think this is one of the benefits compared to a lot of the bigger play development strategies where you're constantly putting all your money into the next deal and trying to bankroll the next one and the next one and the next one.
Yes. I did, about 10 years ago, this is before Africa, I did a 5 townhouse development, which for some people is nothing. They might be listening to this and, oh, that's tiny. But for me, it was massive. Yeah. And if ever I almost lost my shirt, it was on that one. And I think that's the risk as a property investor that's doing these small projects, is you keep going for a bigger and a bigger and a bigger project. Yeah. And each level of style of development is a whole new level of risk. Yeah. But what this is, it's fairly small in terms of time frame. It's smaller in terms of cash outlay. You're dealing with residential lending instead of commercial lending for funding. Yeah. So it's often easier to get the loan. And you're not carrying as much debt. But as soon as you get to kind of 4 or 5 plus dwellings that you're building, it's really a whole new level. And it can take 3 or 4 years to pull off the project.
And there's a lot of risk there. Like, we had a colleague of ours that was getting into the development game. They were in construction phase of a pretty significant block of units. And midway through the construction phase, the building company went into liquidation. And it was only due to a particular clause in their building contract that were able to recover. If that clause wasn't negotiated by their solicitor, they would have lost their shirt, 100%. Yeah. And hey, that's a lot of risk on the table for not necessarily the hugest reward. I think everyone thinks that developers are rolling in it and not necessarily making as big a bucks as you might imagine, right? Yeah,
that's a good caution. I think there might be some people listening to this and thinking, okay, this might be a little bit too hard, or maybe it's a little bit too risky for me. And I just wanted to share with you that that this is it's quite a conservative strategy, but it's a smart strategy. We've done this after doing it for thousands of people and kind of really refined the process. And so what you're probably you're probably your first step if you are interested in these side of things is to work out what your borrowing capacity is. And to create that, if it's part of your roadmap for creating wealth, then it's a very exciting opportunity. And I think it's a lot better than just adding a granny flat. If you just add a granny flat, you add rental income, but you don't necessarily add value.
Yeah.
And our experience is if you do these dual occupancies, you add at least 40% of value. If you do a dual occupancy subdivision, you're literally manufacturing this wealth for you and often doubling the value of the property.
Fantastic. Look, there's nothing that comes without risk. So, Colin, in your experience, although risks may be measurable, what are the key risks and considerations that people need to take into account when they're doing this particular strategy?
Okay, so the first risk is that you can't get a development approved the way you want it to. So you end up with a site which is not matching your game plan for the property. So you always want to have a fallback position.
Sure.
So for each of these, if we can't get a subdivision with an extra dwelling, maybe we're just looking for 2 dwellings on the same title. Maybe as a fallback, we're looking for a house with a secondary dwelling. But at the very worst, really what you've done is you've bought a property at market value, and the worst possible thing that you can do is hold on to it for a year and sell it. So, I mean, you're not gonna tumble like the share market. And this really, for me, is one of the reasons why I love property and particularly this asset class is that, yeah, like you can do a few things. And maybe I can share with you, Dolph DeRoos, one of Rich Dad's advisors from Robert Kiyosaki.
Yeah.
He shares this. He says, if you had, in a simple example, if you had a $50,000 deposit, how much worth of property can you buy? Okay, well, if you leverage at 90%, maybe you don't want to go that high, but say just for this example, for round numbers, it works out easily. You can buy $500,000 worth of property. Mm-hmm. If you have $50,000 worth of shares or you want to purchase some sort of equities, then how much can you buy? You can do some margin lending, but generally you buy about $50,000 worth of shares. Okay, so to illustrate the power of leverage then, the second thing is if the market goes up by 10%, in both scenarios, you're in 500,000 worth of property. You go up 50,000 if it goes up 10%. If you have $50,000 worth of shares, then you make $5,000. Then the third thing, which is awesome about property and really where this strategy ties in, is what can you do if you just trade, if you're just investing in the share market, for example. What can you do? There's not really much you can do. You can monitor the market, but you can't actually add value. And so that's the awesome thing about this strategy and real estate in general, is that you get to manufacture this equity. You can not only do a renovation, but you can start to do these subdivisions as well. And so, I just think some of the risks, you asked about the risks, some of the risks are that you do buy the wrong property, but at the very worst case scenario, you could just sell that property at market value based on what you paid for it.
And that's super important because obviously there's other strategies out there where people are buying vacant blocks. And the issue is in those particular strategies is there's no income coming in. There are costs that are going out. So there's obviously an opportunity cost in terms of holding that. At least in this particular scenario, if it's rented out, we've got income that's coming in, which takes some of the sting out of it, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah, you've got the cash coming in. Yeah, so you're not really negatively gearing, and it's not a huge challenge. I think also it's important, obviously, to minimize the risk of getting the right approval. You obviously need to have the right people around you for that, and whether it's us or anybody, I think it's really important to look at their track record and do they have a town planner on their team, because I think they really do maximize that end value. Some of the other risks which I've experienced but been able to manage is that at the end of the day, you can't sell the property at a reasonable price. So, for example, you talked about somebody that you know, but also one of the challenges I had in that big townhouse development is that we couldn't sell them. They were awesome. They were due to make money. Well, every prediction was that we're going to do really well, but we just couldn't sell them for whatever reason. The market just dropped, and nobody really likes the design that we had. And so what we've created with this is if you buy a house, you build the extra one on the side, you subdivide it. If you hold it, you're actually almost neutral anyway. So the worst case scenario, you just hold on to them all. So, yeah, I think that's probably the main risks. But maybe just to share a little bit of an example, and this is how much it's really helped me. So this is actually one of my projects, and I want to share with you some numbers here, if that would be helpful.
Please, mate. Yep, we love numbers here, so we're always keen to get into the nitty gritty. So
we'll see if I get tongue-tied, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so if you, and these are the deals that we're looking at the moment, if you had, I'm just going to use round figures again. If you had $50,000, you probably you can probably purchase for around 500,000. This is for the bottom tier. This is for ones that are probably in the regional centres rather than the capital centre. And you end up with a $500,000 property. You probably want to allow around 250,000 to 300,000 to be able to get it built and approved and all the soft costs and everything like that. So you're looking at around 500 plus 300,000, around 800,000 worth of costs there. And okay, look at the end value. So what we're looking at is an existing house and putting this dual occupancy subdivision in place for you. So you've now got 2 dwellings. And the interesting part is that, I don't know why it is, but when you subdivide off a property, it doesn't actually drop in value too much. Because often these larger lots, people don't want to mow the grass. People don't, they care for the house. Yeah. And yes, the value is in the land. But for some reason, it just doesn't work out that way. So I find that if you subdivide off the back half of the property, or if it's a corner lot off the side, you're probably only going to drop about 10% worth of value anyway. Wow. So you're able to, so using those figures, if we purchased for around 500,000, you're probably looking at about 450 worth of value after you sell it. After you subdivide it, you got the second property, and the second property is brand new. It's worth more, and so you're looking at, say, 550,000. So you're looking at around, what are we up to? About $1 million gross, and costs around 800,000. It's taken you a year and a half or 2 years to do to get a profit of around 200,000 on your original 50,000 investment. But the most important thing is not how much money you make, because that's a very good return on investment. The most important, though, is what's the end game, is what's the positive cash flow for you. Yeah. I started off talking about going away for 6 weeks, and maybe just a heart-to-heart thought is, I'm a business owner and I love business. And although I'm talking about property, business is really where I'm focused on a lot. And I give everything to my business. I think as a business owner, you kind of risk everything. Yeah. And if it wasn't for my property portfolio, 2 things wouldn't happen. A lot of things that wouldn't happen, but 2 things wouldn't happen. I wouldn't bring my best to the business, because I would play defense, not offense. But because I've got my property portfolio, I feel like I can take calculated risks and move forward with confidence and take advantage of opportunities. If I was just flying by the seat of my pants and didn't have a property portfolio, I wouldn't have the confidence that I have in business. So I think it helps your business. Yeah. But I think second importantly is that it gives me confidence, most importantly, to move away from my business, that I can have the confidence to go away for 6 weeks and just work in the mornings and take the afternoons off. And I just had the most beautiful experiences with my 3-year-old and 1-year-old. Every single day we created a beautiful experience together. And I wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have had the confidence to step away from my business if it wasn't for my property portfolio. So when you're choosing whatever strategy it is, whether it's this one or another one, I wish you all the best in building that property portfolio, because it does bring that confidence. But please don't make the mistakes that I did in that first property portfolio of 13 properties that were negatively geared. Don't build something which requires your business to support the properties. Yeah. My philosophy is, and I might be corrected, is that your property portfolio and your business should stand independently. They can back each other up, but don't make your business requiring the cash of your properties, and don't require your properties requiring the cash from your business.
Yeah, that's so important, mate. And I think far too few people really share these sentiments, and it's so important and so invaluable. That I think first things first, people are just doubling down on their business without considering when they're going to start taking chips off the table. And the reality is that there's only about 6% of businesses that are ever sold for a profit, if they're ever sold at all. And I don't like those odds. I'm not a gambling man, but I don't like those odds. And further to that, you need to make sure that you've got that backup plan, because things change. COVID happens, recessions happen, GFCs happen, and who knows what's going to be the next thing that kind of hits us from by surprise and hits our business for a 6. Yeah. Whereas what's always performed, particularly if we're buying good quality property, is property markets. People need somewhere to live, right? So it's
Absolutely.
about having that good backup plan and turning that business profit into personal wealth. So I think this has been really invaluable, Colin. So let's talk about your ideal clients, mate. So, and if somebody's listened to this, they're a business owner, they're an affluent investor, and they want to start making smart investments. They want to start turning their business profit into personal wealth, or turn their traditional property strategy into a way that they can manufacture wealth. Who's an ideal client for you?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I think the ideal client is really someone who has probably worked with you guys to work out where they're heading in their life, and just to having that game plan of where they really want to be. I heard a great quote the other day, Michael Hyatt, and he said, "We never drift to a desired location. We never drift to a desired location. Every time you drift, you're where you don't want to be." So we're looking for people that obviously have some goals and know where they want to be, but at the same time, they don't want to do everything and try to make all the mistakes themselves. That they're happy to focus on their business, which is what they love and what they're good at, but also somebody that can manage it for them. So we can take it off their hands for them. We find sometimes that if we're putting together a development application and a client really is really gung-ho, they call up the assessing officer and they abuse them. "Why are you taking so long?" And then next thing gets refused. So they're off just to step back, let it happen, and leave it to people like ourselves.
I love that, mate. I think that's great advice. So we've covered a lot of value, Colin, and I'd like to summarize it into three key action items. So if you had to summarize all of the value that we've covered today into your top 3 tips, what would they be?
Okay, top 3 tips. Top 3 tips would be, first and foremost, take action. That we don't know how long we've all got, and the best time for property was yesterday. The next best time is today. And I just think of the compounding growth of real estate in Australia and in the Western world. And if property does double every 7 to 10 years, which it has, if it does, and it does that in the future, 1 decade of indecision, 1 decade of toying around with your business and putting all the money into your business without pulling some out, 1 decade of indecision can literally mean millions in your retirement. If you're younger, time is with you. If you're a little bit older, then these strategies will help you to build a lot quicker. And instead of waiting around for the market to grow, what we've talked about today is not just 10% growth on average. We're talking about 20 to 100% worth of growth that we can create for you in manufacturing that equity. So first, take action. Second, educate yourself. This is just the start, not the end. If any of this is interest to you, keep learning, keep growing, keep tuning into this podcast, keep associating with people like this. And really, we are your community, and we're here to support you. And I think it's very lonely sometimes as an entrepreneur, but also as a property investor. My third is that good guys actually finish first. And to have honesty, have integrity. You don't have to. You can wheel and deal, but maintain your honor. What is your honor? I think that the world has changed where people want people they can trust. And if you can bring your ethics, bring the character, bring the person that you are to your business and to your property investing, you'll only be a success.
That's so important, mate. It's so refreshing given that there are a lot of sharks in the property space, and there are a lot of people that aren't doing the right thing. So it's a breath of fresh air to speak to someone like yourself, Colin. So I appreciate you sharing all of the value. So guys, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, everything we've spoken about, and you do want to get in touch with Colin and the council approval team to have a conversation around how they can help you manufacture wealth and be able to achieve your goals through property, feel free to reach out. All of the details are in the comments below. Colin, thanks again. I really appreciate your time, mate. And guys, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Enjoy the Journey podcast. Look forward to catching you next time.